Hello and welcome to the second episode of Based. If you would like to know further about our political views, please check out our first episodes. And today we'll be talking about immigration.
So in terms of how this episode is going to kind of roll out, we're going to cover different subtopics. So we'll start off with the social, political, and economic effects, and then we'll discuss specific policy proposals, such as Trump's border wall or how we can make the legal immigration process better. So I guess to start off, we can go around and kind of say our views, and then we can get into debate.
So I'll go first. So in my opinion, we should, for a couple of reasons, not just the coronavirus, but this is one, we should have an outright ban on legal immigration for a temporary period until we can further deal with the coronavirus and its economic effects, along with the political and social effects. In my opinion, anyone who's on the right side of the political spectrum should be against legal immigration for a couple of reasons. The first one being that only 1 in 10 legal immigrants vote vote Republican, my bad. And then for illegal immigrants that become naturalized, not through the legal process, but they are legal and then they go through the legal process, those people vote, only 1 in 20 are Republicans. So anybody who's on the right side of the political spectrum and would like to keep it that way, in which we follow, a capitalistic system and, some social conservative values, you don't have to necessarily believe in that, but just a capitalist system, anything right-leaning, I think you should be against legal immigration for the demographic changes it has caused to this country.
What? So here's where Nathan's kind of being ignorant in that stance, and then I'll get into my stance. Okay. Why would you, if you're an immigrant, and furthermore, if you're an illegal immigrant, why would you ever hold the stance of being a Republican when they actively seek to be against your worldview? Like, if you're an immigrant, then the Republican stance is actively fighting against you, right? And your experiences and helping you out.
Not if you're a legal immigrant. Not if you're legal.
Yes, if you're illegal. They want to cut down
Conservative Inc., the people that are the Republican Party actively support mass immigration. For example, Charlie Kirk, and his statement of we should stamp green cards to every high school diploma of an immigrant. So basically, he supports mass immigration, and Charlie Kirk has an influence on Donald Trump, along with Jared Kushner, who supports stuff like that. Trump's immigration people like Stephen Miller.
If you receive an American education from an American high school, then why would you not receive an American green card?
He didn't say American.
Wait, Hayden, I just don't understand your belief that Republicans are opposed to legal immigrants.
They're not.
I just don't think that's true. And I think why 1 in 10 immigrants vote, only 1 in 10 immigrants, vote Republican is because they come to America with this hope that they can start a new life and enter this flourishing capitalist system, and then they go to college and then they are taught through the leftist professors there.
Holy shit, we're not.
A terrible place. That America is a terrible place and we need to overthrow everything and implement a socialist system. That is why a lot of the immigrants go left and they have a hateful view towards what America.
But then most immigrants would actually have to go to college, in which case they don't.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the immigrants that do come here.
But then it wouldn't be 1 in 20 or 1 in 10. But then it wouldn't be 1 in 20 and 1 in 10. That doesn't explain anything.
Well, some people go to college and realize
that doesn't explain any of the numbers.
But but what it explains the younger immigrant base and the children of immigrants. It explains that. However, I understand your point of saying that it doesn't explain all of it, the 1 in 10 only voting Republican. And I believe that it's not the only factor. It's not just colleges that make these immigrants vote left. It's just an inherent view of, the world that they vote left compared to, the United States.
Because the system is actively seeking to rob them of any opportunity.
How so?
How?
Capitalism is inherently a predatory system. Someone who comes here with nothing and with no support is going to have a much tougher time, especially with the current laws that we have in place on the economic system.
But if that was the case, Hayden, then they wouldn't be coming to this country in the first place.
No, they don't come to this country in the first place because of economic reasons. It's mostly because of social reasons.
Yes, they do.
They clearly come here for economic
reasons. it's very
some
difficult.
do. I'm not saying that economic reasons is not even a part of it at all, but I'm saying a lot of the time, and most of the time, it is for cultural and social problems.
They move here because they need a safer place to live, or they want jobs
Yes.
that are more readily
But
available.
it's inherent. Most of them are inherently workers, and I can tell you this for a fact because I was just, like I said, for Mana, I've been looking this up, and I believe the statistic was, I think it was 67% of migrants are looking for economic reasons, and 67% are workers within the new economic system in their host country.
All right. But then I'll back down off of that one. But then why do they essentially? I'm just saying, I can admit when I'm wrong. I know you can't, but it's okay.
Okay. Well,
I feel like you're
we
just
haven't
flipping it back onto him to distract from the fact that you were wrong.
Yeah.
No, I'm wrong. Okay, we can talk about it. I was wrong about the economic versus the social one. That's okay.
Right, just
But still, Nico, are you you're against me here right now. Are you saying you're inherently anti-immigration?
I'm not saying I'm anti-immigration. I'm just saying you were wrong in your reasoning, and you obviously agreed to that. But I'm just making fun of you. That's just
Okay.
All right, let's move on from this. Hayden, did you have a follow-up question for Nathan on immigrant?
No, I need to hear more of Nathan's points, obviously.
You want me to continue to go?
I mean, were you continue talking? I thought I interrupted you.
Well, because remember, okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, so basically, pretty much, they're coming from different countries with different societal values, and they're inherently voting different than Republican values, which, I'm not saying that's inherently American values, but they're left wing in most cases. For example, south of the border, I believe it's 7 in 10 Hispanic voters are inherent Democrat, so that's 70%. For African Americans, it's I think almost 9 in 10. I believe 92% of the African American population voted for Obama. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying when you look at immigration statistics coming from either Africa and south of the border, you're going to see that they're going to follow these trends. And for me and Nico specifically, because we identify as Republican or identify as right leaning, this inherently harms our worldview because no matter if it's our economic or social views, these people vote opposite of what we believe in. So I'm not saying because Democrats inherently support mass immigration. What? Go ahead.
I just think it's very un-American of you to be opposed to legal immigration just because it would it wouldn't result in a favorable political climate for you. I mean, this was a country we were founded on democracy. This goes to a larger question of, like, do we want to be barring people from voting and discouraging people from voting if it goes against your political system? I mean, I understand that you are a capitalist and you have conservative values, but we have to let these people vote and let their voices be
I'm not saying we don't let them vote. I'm saying we stop them from coming to this country in the first place because most of them are inherently immigrants. I was bringing up, nationality because that's where these immigrants are mainly coming from. It's no longer Western Europe. If you look at the trends, it was in the 1920s, it was mainly Central Europeans, Germans, and Italians. And then that stopped though, right? Well, ever since 1975, when we got rid of the Exclusion Act and, Congress opened it up, there was like a specific thing where we're supposed to take in like 300,000 a year and that's it. Well, it was obviously allowed more, but ever since then, we've had a constant influx of immigrants from south of the border or from the developing world.
You can also argue, going back to what Ben was saying, that the people on the left are trying to bring in more immigrants because they know that that's going to support their views. That's not all of it, and that's a bit.
That's what I'm saying. Because Ben was attacking me for saying it's undemocratic of me to stop immigration. But my point to you is that it's the other way around. The Democrats need.
But here's where I disagree with you here, because the normal worldview on immigration throughout the world, the consistent worldview, especially for a developed nation like us, is to allow immigration, right? The status quo is to allow immigration. You're proposing that you want to cut off immigration, and your reasoning for it is because you don't want your political values or political numbers, not really advantage, but numbers to be messed up throughout the country. Well, but you can't just say that leftists like immigration because we want more votes, because the status quo is immigration.
So let me respond to that.
You can open borders.
So for example, the left supports it to help their base because those people inherently vote Democrat. But on the conservative Inc. side, the modern Republican side, they obviously shill for big business and corporations. And who does legal immigration help? Big business and the immigrants. It doesn't help the native worker. So by bringing in more immigrants, that's the status quo, is because they're funded by big businesses and corporations. So of course they support immigration because they're funded by the people that want more immigrants to work for low wage jobs. So of course it's the status quo. Now, the left is both shilling for big business and wanting more of a base. The right, however, fails to acknowledge that it changes what they want to conserve because in favor of big business that they are funded by.
But Nathan, then the question becomes, would you rather have immigrants working, would you rather be outsourcing that work, or would you rather have corporations supporting immigration because they want, would you rather have leftists supporting corporations supporting immigration because they want to keep work within the country?
Well, okay.
They have to pay immigrants the same amount of money as any American worker.
No, but if you look at supply and if you look
at supply,
they don't. They don't. I mean, they should. They don't.
Yeah, because also if you look at
legally, and you can't have too many.
Then you'd have minimum wage. But if you look at supply and demand, the more workers you have, the less you have to pay them.
The jobs that immigrants take are not the jobs that a normal. I mean.
Correct, because they're mainly low-skilled labor that they go for, the agricultural fields. I understand that.
Low skill is not the word choice to use there.
That's what
true. They have less.
It's low-skilled labor. That's what it's called. Yeah, that's the term to call it.
Unskilled laborers.
I think it made unskilled. But
Okay, but I think those unskilled labor jobs are the backbone of this country, and they really help us.
Not entirely.
Build.
Well, they do help us, but I'm saying...
So if you acknowledge that they help us, are you saying that we should cut off immigration only for political reasons to help?
No, I'm not saying the immigration...
But you acknowledge that it will hurt the economy?
No, I said the agricultural field is the backbone of the economy. I didn't say immigrants were. I'm saying you need to fill up those jobs with the people that are unemployed, that are able-bodied.
But we have an agricultural surplus in this country.
But you can't just say that. You can't just tell people that are unemployed, hey, go work in the agricultural sector. I don't think it's
that.
Yes, you can if you have a state fund.
You have to have a flow inwards of Nathan, migrants come into this country. You can't just say, let's take all the unemployed people and put them in the agricultural sector, where
it just doesn't work.
Immigrants that's not a feasible option. So basically,
because these white people are coming from suburban America, which these jobs don't exist anywhere locally within that area. And I mean, feasibly, they'd like to continue living in suburban America, in which if they took these agricultural jobs, they would never be able to afford living there.
But
exactly.
It's not.
You are valuing Republicans being in Congress and the White House over the economy that we want to maintain as a nation.
That's false, because as Nico said, there's an agricultural surplus.
The government has to pay farms, so they're not just letting food rot, or they pay them so that agricultural prices don't just deflate super hard, which hurts the economy, because that hurts your grocers, who need to sell them at a certain price to maintain their profit margins. So,
second of all,
as many immigrants as you think. We really don't need much of any immigrants in the agricultural center that we don't already have.
And second of all, if you're not looking at agriculture necessarily, and you're just looking at other labor forms that big corporations use and they need immigrants for that, you also have to think about automation and how that's going to affect. Yang was talking about how UBI would be used to pay these people that would be laid off because of big tech, right? Or in AI and automation. So the more immigrants you take in 10 years, when those jobs are taken over by AI, now you're also going to have to pay those people because they're out of work. And now there's the native born people and the immigrants that don't have jobs because they lost it to automation. And now you're going to have to pay both of them, or you have to find something out. And with more people in this country, you're going to have to find some way to pay them. If you use UBI, that's going to be even worse.
That's why I think we need work permits, because if you bring them in on work permits, they're only here for a certain amount of time when they have jobs. and then if they can't renew that with new jobs, they go back, and that provides us the immigrants we need at this current time. But if the job issue becomes a growing problem with automation or something similar, then
And you
there's
can-
no
yeah.
jobs going to be had. And
But
we're not giving
if
them-
automation
But, I
comes
mean,
in and
okay,
does
but
that
here's the
same
problem.
thing,
Go ahead.
if automation comes in and does the thing that you're talking, then that isn't uniquely an American problem. That will be a worldwide problem.
Correct.
Everyone will be in the same
but
boat.
but America has to place its citizens before illegal immigrants or immigrants on work permits. Like, very few people argue to provide social services to illegal immigrants. Like, it's just not something you
No,
do.
I mean,
Citizens, they don't pay taxes.
I don't
And-
think
and second-
anybody's. I don't think anybody's proposing that. That's a pretty radical idea. But
So
going back to your point about having work permits, I think that's just gonna worsen.
It's not
the problem
entirely
of-
feasible.
Right. No, I see where you're coming from on that idea, but it's also gonna worsen the problem of illegal immigration, because how illegal immigration works is most of the cases. I mean, there are some illegal border crossings, but people come here on a work permit and overstay the visa. That's the majority of cases. So we're going to get a lot more illegal, undocumented immigrants here if we just hand out a lot of.
Yeah, but they're not. If they're undocumented, they're not getting
Which the
social
right
services.
poses as a huge problem.
If they're undocumented, they won't be getting any social services. And then the main issue of having too high immigration numbers disappears because they're just not valid citizens or to get.
Exactly.
It's just
Right.
not. That's
But I'm
the
saying that'll just fuel the problem that the right is just trying to combat that issue. But
well, you're generalizing the right, because I think we should combat
no,
both. legal
I'm not
and
generalizing the right. That's a mainstream policy.
Exactly, it's
and
mainstream, but
illegal
not a lot. Just because it's mainstream, that's big business supporting, the mainstream Republicans. It's not entirely huge right-wing worldview. And second
Yeah.
of all, the more immigrants you bring in, it lowers wages for the American worker. So I think that's
the
also
unskilled American worker.
correct.
Yeah.
But that's still an American worker. Are you just going to say toss them aside because they're unskilled?
But
No,
I
I know
think,
it's just a bit of an
to your
overkill.
point, Nathan, the unskilled American worker has more interest in supporting leftist policy than they do right-wing policy.
Well, that's
Yeah, but
economics, not
ideally they'd
necessarily
have
social.
jobs.
Well, yeah, low-skilled workers have jobs, and the more people you bring in, the lower their wages will become.
And it's still fewer people who would be supporting ideals if you want to take Nathan's stance.
Say again, sorry, cut out.
If you bring in immigrants to lower American wages or unskilled American wages, then now you have the original unskilled workers who are already most likely to lean left, and you have the immigrants who are generally leaning left. I'm not saying that's something the government has to or should combat, but it would still be worse from Nathan's perspective.
If we stop immigration, or
No, if we brought in immigration, it would add to the unskilled worker base, which would be more likely to support left-wing policies.
correct.
That was more directed towards Hayden.
Okay, got it. And I'm saying, as a right-wing person, you would think if you put someone in office that's right-leaning as well, that supports your economic views, you would want them to combat legal immigration, because as soon as they're out of office, the Democrat or the left-leaning person comes in and they support massive immigration. And when that happens, then you lose a chance for ever winning a Republican thing again. For example, in 2040, the people, whites overwhelmingly support Republican policies. It's like, I believe, like 67, 69% of white people support support right-wing policies. Well, by the time in 2040, when they become a minority, right, then because of massive immigration, then you're no longer going to have a Republican president, or the term Republican is going to mean something completely different than we see it as today.
Yeah, but
why is that
with
here?
the electoral college and most
you need young workers coming into this country. I mean, you look at the Social Security deficit. That is a very big problem that will only get bigger with time. And if we're not having an influx of young people who are working and not being supported by Social Securities, then that's going to increase the deficit over time. So we do need some level of immigration.
Well, that wouldn't necessarily
Right.
be immigration. You could
Security,
combat that with growing birth rates, if we were to find a way to solve that. And I think there's a few policies out there that would support
Birth rates are shrinking.
Exactly, that's my point.
And then
But
also,
how do you get
back
them
to your
to
point,
grow?
Nathan.
I mean, you look at like Japan; they haven't been able to do that. They've tried.
Correct, they've tried, but we also
Maybe
have to. Don't you think we should try before we bring in massive amounts of people, specifically for your right-leaning political views? If you bring in, if you have native-born people, they're more likely to support right-leaning views
Yeah,
rather
but
than
that
if you try to.
doesn't pay off until 20 years from now, whereas immigrants pay off immediately if they're of age to work. Like you're gonna have to wait at least like 15, 16 years for those
But
new
then you would combat
children.
that in 15, 16 years.
But for 15
If
to
we've been,
16 years,
if we've been,
at least
but if
need-
we've
I
been,
understand your point, but you've yet to explain why any of this is inherently negative.
Right. And then also, Nathan, back to your point that like by 2040, we're not going to see a Republican in the White House. I don't agree with that. I think as time goes
That's
on
just
and we see
statistics.
more rural to
Party's
urban
changing.
migration, then we're going to see a lot more Republican candidates in the White House because of the electoral college. And a lot of these immigrants are coming to big cities. So it's actually not really helping. So if
and
people
actually-
come to Los Angeles or San Francisco or Austin, Texas, whatever, it's not really going to, well, Austin, Texas is a counterexample because they go red. But like if they're coming to New York, California, all those places, it's not going to help if they're blue because that
but
state
like
would
we were,
already go blue.
we're talking about the agricultural industry earlier. Agriculture is mainly in southern or Midwestern states.
California's really big for agriculture.
Well, California is another one, but I'm
The
saying that's
biggest,
not,
actually.
Yeah.
Well, that's one, for example. I'm just saying. And like we were talking about Texas, if Texas goes blue, that ends Republican forever.
But you pretend like political policy is static.
Yeah,
Like it will all be. I mean, political policy throughout human history has been shifting towards the progressive side.
Exactly,
It just
but
depends
as
on how
someone,
fast
as,
you want
until
that
it
to
goes
happen.
too far, and then you have a,
but
you have
as-
a reaction to
as-
that.
Right.
as,
and then
but
you
as
get-
someone
But I mean,
who supports,
inevitably, it's moving left.
Well, like the 1980s, for example, a lot of countries shifted back right because, like, Great Britain was left leaning up until the 1980s, and then they flew back right. America was not quite as much, but still going more left until Ronald Reagan. Like, there is a certain point in society to where things go too
But
left.
Nathan, or Nico. But Nico, I mean, you go back
Yeah, but how
100
do we
years
get a
from
trend?
now, and 200 years from now, I mean, it's inherently more
There's
progressive.
reason to believe that trend could be ending. Like eventually, we are going to. Like change has been growing smaller when people.
Not if you're a Marxist.
Yeah, but Marxists are like an extremely small. Like it's a minute portion of the population. You have like democratic socialists, and that's not even like that big. Like Bernie hasn't won an election yet. He hasn't won a primary.
Well, he's been senator for.
But
and he's also
been
made
in
it.
small
He's
state
also
and
made it to the primary. And my point is to people that are right leaning, because this is not necessarily because Hayden would, the more it goes left, that benefits people like Hayden, right? Because they support policies like that. And as Hayden was saying,
it doesn't benefit. Whoa. Just so we're clear, it does not benefit me as a person.
not as you as a person.
None of my policies benefit me as a person.
I'm not saying it benefits you as a person. I'm saying it benefits your policies, like policies that you
Okay.
support.
Okay.
So yeah, because I understand like but what I'm saying is that for people like Nico, do you really want the term for right leaning to change? Like, do you really want the term right leaning to be what modern Democrats are? Is that what you want?
Well, it's always changing, and there's like.
But there's
for
ways
example,
to prevent it. There's ways to
You brought
prevent
up
it.
automation earlier. I think that in automation, like if you look at what produces the most new jobs in America, it's startup businesses. And startup businesses flourish with lack of regulation. So if that becomes a necessity, you will see Republicans pushing for that. And the American people will notice. They're not just these ignorant masses that just.
I'm not saying they are, but
No,
I'm saying
I'm not insinuating that you are. I'm just saying like politicians change, and that would become something that is necessary to have more startup businesses, to have more new businesses. And that's something I think that a more libertarian perspective promotes the best. And that's something America's done extraordinarily well since like really forever, but especially since like the 1940s.
But my point is that's not the only thing, because that may happen where small businesses will be starting up and then people will become libertarian leaning or right leaning. But still, you need to combat it in other ways through, preventing massive immigration at the very least, cutting immigration, if not cutting it at all the way.
I'm just saying, I think
I'm also scared
overstating
about
the threat
capitalism
to
being
the right-leaning party. Like, I just think you're fixating on immigration as this massive threat. Like, there have always
Because it is.
dislike certain immigrations when they peak. So it's not. I just think you think it's
But this-
bigger than it is.
Right.
But the
I
problem
don't
is,
think. I mean, I'm.
no, but
I'm
can I say something to that specifically
Go ahead.
because he was attacking my point? Is that yes, there's been always massive influxes of immigration. For example, the Germans and
Irish.
Central Europeans in 1920s, 1940s and stuff like that. The Irish, yeah. So my point is though, those people shared values closer to that what America was, and who we're taking in now is
No, they
mainly in the
didn't. Wait, but no, they didn't. Just because they're white doesn't mean that they shared any of our inherent values.
Yeah, people attack the Irish constantly
you're
for
cutting
being
out for me.
Catholics who didn't share our values.
Yeah.
There's been one Catholic president.
I
You
mean,
guys
I
are
think
cutting out.
Nathan is just saying it's different now because there could be a threat of us moving, the U.S. moving towards more of a
Birth rates are
socialist
declining,
system.
sure, but
So-
it's not.
Right. I mean,
There is a bit of truth to what he's saying. I just think
I just
It's
don't think it's a just or humane policy to restrict immigration just to prevent against capitalism being thrown for us moving
Yeah.
towards more of a
also like if
like I'm
look at
I'm with Nathan. I don't want us to shift economically much in the future, or not like
Not far left.
like I don't want fundamental change that Warren and Sanders were calling for in the last primary. But I don't think restricting immigration is the right way to do that. I think we need to change more of the cultural fabric or change stuff.
And furthermore, through like the democratic process of what you were saying, Ben, like if most people think that left-leaning policies will actually solve the economic problems of the country, they will vote left. And if they don't solve the economic problems of the country, then they'll go back and voting right. And that's just how democracy works in general. So to try and
Also-
superficially account for that is sort of counterintuitive to actually the process, the cultural process and the society tradition that you're trying to defend.
Exactly.
I think also with automation, if that starts killing jobs and there are very few jobs available in America, immigrants will stop coming. Immigrants go to places with more jobs and they stop going to America when there are less jobs.
Really
And that's something that has been documented consistently.
based.
So it's
But
not
there-
like, it's not going to, in like say 20, 30 years where theoretically automation is killing American jobs, there's not also going to be a consistent massive influx of immigrants.
But
Because
by that
unskilled jobs, or sorry, you go.
But by that time, it's already too late because then you already had a massive influx before automation was a real problem, where people started acknowledging it. That's before it became a real problem. We'll still have a massive influx of immigration, changing societal and cultural and economic norms of what people support.
Well, if we have, say we have an economic recession for, I don't know how many years it could last coming out of like this whole shutdown. If we have
Well,
one
yes.
at all,
This would be-
immigrants will stop coming because there are no jobs to be had, and that is going to have an effect. So
But my point to that also is, you realize that immigrants specifically, have higher birth rates than that of native born.
oh,
So
certainly.
even with, even if we happen to stop immigration or immigrants don't come here because of what happened of an economic crisis from COVID-19, they will still be supporting left-leaning policies.
Oh yeah, I'm not docking that. I'm saying like less will be coming during the shutdown because there are less jobs to be had. Like so many people are sitting
Not
on
Not necessarily, because if you look at, you could also look at, there could be even less jobs in the economies that they come from, so they'll need to go to a place that has more, even though there'll be technically overall less in the United States. If their home country has less than there was before, then they'll obviously need somewhere else to go.
Well, that's certainly possible. I'm not sure exactly where the statistics lie in that. I haven't looked it up, but that is something interesting to dive into.
So, guys, I think we've kind of been going in circles the last few minutes with legal immigration. Do we want to now move on to talking about illegal immigration and certain proposals like the border wall that could combat that?
I'm down for that. Just the
Sure.
only thing is, can we just get a quick, because I'm guessing at least me, Hayden, or me, Nico, and Ben are against illegal immigration. Hayden, I don't know your views on that.
I mean, against illegal immigration is such a weird and vague policy. like
Just define
obviously
your policy.
I mean, nobody's really in favor of people
Not
coming
necess-
here without going through the necessary steps.
That's actually false. I literally got called a racist by a dude who literally supported open borders and that we shouldn't basically have borders at all. So there's people even in Manhattan Beach that support policies like that.
okay.
That's pretty radical. That's pretty crazy.
But my point is, there's people that support policy. So I don't know, because Hayden would we
Hayden
consider
is
Hayden
one radical person.
exactly in economic views? We'd consider Hayden radical. So maybe I want to find out Hayden's view on that. If we should
Okay.
just like say
No, I
open
don't
borders.
believe.
Just what's your policy on?
I don't think open borders won't work under a late stage capitalism and early stage socialist economic policy, and it will kind of it depends on the state of the developing world as we know it, and also with what Nico was saying with automation and how that affects like the opportunity for jobs. Like it's kind of like how Yang got his entire platform is the fact that automation will inherently bring left-leaning policy as people need, I mean, subsidization to
not
combat the
necessarily.
loss of job values. And so what I'm going on here about is that I don't believe that the way that we handle illegal immigration right now is humane. And I don't obviously want 50 million people to come and immigrate illegally tomorrow. But at the same time, like I'm not necessarily, illegal immigration accounts for about 17, a third, about like 6% of our workforce. So like, I don't know. I'm just not really.
6%'s a lot.
It is, and that's my point.
But
like pretending like, oh, because someone is illegally immigrated means that they are inherently a bad person is kind of a flawed
So
mindset.
are you proposing paths to naturalization for illegal immigrants then?
Yeah, I think that the path to nationalization should be much, much easier.
See, for me, I think it should be the path to visas and working permits made more available, because I would much rather have them living in America paying taxes, because then they're not.
But no one who's illegally immigrating has a.
No, but I'm
they have
saying
a visa, but it'll run out.
To getting working permits much easier for those illegal immigrants, so they keep the jobs they're already filling, but they just start paying taxes.
So
I think that's
wait. But Nico, you have to be careful. So when you say, I mean, most illegal immigrants immigrate legally and then become illegal once their visa runs out. So you're proposing increasing the time on these visas and providing
no, making them easier to
obtain.
To not obtain and like reobtain. I think there's a Renee. There we go.
Okay.
I just think like because they're going to be here, that's almost an inevitability. Unless Nathan might
Right.
have, but
I don't think you're going to
I
stop.
think we should focus on getting them to be contributing to the American government and to the just by paying taxes. I think that's much better than them sitting here and not paying taxes. It doesn't. It helps. It provides value to the economy.
Well, let's just all agree on something right now. The American economy will not function without the contributions that illegal immigrants
definitely.
fund.
That's why I
Okay.
don't think we should deport.
But
them.
I think you could replace what they.
I don't think.
I don't think you can. I don't think you have a willing workforce to replace it, Nathan.
But you're not going to
Well, you
make
would have
6% of the working
20
population disappear.
25% of all construction jobs are immigrants.
Yeah, but you're not going to like.
Illegal or legal?
25 are just flat immigrants.
So,
Yeah,
but
but-
oftentimes the first job that someone gets once they immigrate legally would be construction, and then their green card runs
Like
out. and they're still-
deportation isn't like one day we say we're deporting everyone and bam, they're gone. So
Right.
no,
Yeah.
I
So in
understand.
terms of like the rise of illegal immigration, I think what we can do to combat that is create an easier path to citizenship when they come here, or reform the system in which people come here legally
see, I think
with working visas.
I
Because the
disagree.
wall and border security is really, its effect is going to be so minimal. It's a massive waste of money. Massive.
I just don't think. Yeah,
It's
it's
not
not very.
about the border wall. It is just, it's only, Trump is only proposing that, and Republicans are only backing that because of symbolic reasons, because they don't
Well, it
want
does-
immigration. It's not actually going to do anything, because as we have stated multiple times on this debate here, the majority of illegal immigrants come here legally and then become illegal immigrants because they overstay their visas. So
So,
that's not really
can
going
I
to do anything to combat it.
can I say something?
Sure.
So it combats the people that come over here illegally without the process of coming here illegally in the first place. How I understand that's not a large majority of the illegal immigration that occurs in the United States, but one policy that I researched into a little bit that you can combat illegal immigration in the sense that they come here illegally over a work visa and then they overstay it was there's a policy called E-Verify, right? So basically, companies would be forced to take it on. So it would be federally mandated, and basically, it just ensures that the people that are working for you are indeed allowed to work for you, like they have the legal status to work for you. So
But
by implementing that policy, the people that don't renew their visas or are not supposed to be here anymore won't be able to find jobs, and that will take away the incentive for them being here in the first place.
but then you run into the same economic problems that we've been talking and dancing around this entire debate.
Which is what? Which is
Which is that
not
if you
the
need
illegal
legal immigrants to operate the economy that we run.
Yeah, because if you start pulling too many jobs out of the system like that, it's going to sort of shell shock it, and then the
But you're
amount
not pulling out jobs out of the system.
But then the companies are going to have to pay more for the workers, which you can argue that's a good thing or bad thing. And if
Well, I
you
would think for
start
the
overly
American worker,
regulating-
that's something you'd want to support is getting paid more because of the result of.
well, no, because then the
companies-
product price goes up or the production goes down.
But I'm willing for that to happen because one, we have an agricultural surplus, as you stated earlier, and second of all, I'm glad to support the American worker, whether it's not paying $5
Well, there's
more
other
to a
ways to
product.
solve the agricultural surplus. Like, I
No,
mean,
but the point is we have an agricultural surplus, and a majority of these
yeah,
illegal
but the only
immigrants
reason
work
it costs America is because the government continues to bail out the farms. That's why it costs Americans money.
because we bail out the farms that have an agricultural surplus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand, but like you were talking about earlier, when you take away illegal immigrants from the thing or from the equation, and then these companies have to pay the American workers, minimum wage or a wage that the Americans will
be paying more because if there's not enough workers, each respective business has to entice the workers to come to their.
That's what I'm talking about, and I'd be willing to pay more for a product as a result of that because it's supporting the American worker. Now, I understand big companies want their profit margins to go up, but I'm sorry, I don't want to shill for big business.
No, but if you start pulling illegal immigrant workers out of small businesses and they have to raise what they're paying, their profit margins get sliced, and that business effectively disappears or has to reduce its role, and it hinders their ability to grow. And as I stated earlier, smaller startup businesses are absolutely key to helping us provide more jobs in the future, whereas big businesses can take those losses. So it really helped the big businesses the most as far as competition goes. Maybe a slight reduction in immediate profit margins, but the overall volume of their revenues will go up and the total volume of their profit will then go up. I'm not
Nathan,
saying
you have to
exactly as I laid out.
Nathan, if you don't want to be a show for big business, then take the money off of the top, take the money off of the profit, but don't inhibit the ability for that business and that corporation and that alley of the economy to function, right? The socialists don't say, oh, you shouldn't employ anyone because corporations would make money. No, that isn't how it works. You take the money off the top to fund people at the bottom.
But I'm saying
I don't think we should get into socialism right now because that might take up a bit.
That's not exactly what I was talking. I was talking about how you'd be paying more for a product as a result of American workers working the jobs because.
Yeah, but the effects of that aren't just that American buyers are paying more. It's that American companies can go out. The smaller American companies get hit the most by regulations because they don't have the volume.
But
like if you have
the smaller companies aren't the ones hiring illegal immigrants in the most part.
Well, but put it this way: if you have small profit margins, but you sell a lot, you make a lot of profit. So if you start shrinking the profit margins of small businesses, they can't take that blow. It's not a very it's not a good business to run.
And then furthermore, then you'd be decreasing the workforce by which they actually make their money. And so
yeah, then you also have less buyers. Which is why I think we should just make them legal workers in America who pay taxes. I think that's really the ideal solution. And also, if you start
Well,
to get
I'd be in favor of that as long as, first of all, if we need the jobs added. But in 2019 alone, we had 5.9 million
but
people
it's hard to get work permits.
Unemployment rate is such an inconsistent stat. It's just
So
not how that
unemployment
works.
rate isn't the only thing. Like if migrants want
It's
to
not-
come to America and they need to get a work permit, it's hard to find a work permit if there are few jobs. So less immigrants will come if we can regulate it. And that's really the big question, is regulating the undocumented immigrants.
Right.
That's a very hard thing to do. I can talk all I want about the negative effects of regulating it does, but at some point you do need to start regulating it to have any effectual policy.
So Nathan, would you be in favor of deporting current illegal immigrants in America? Like if you
Yeah,
had
do you guys want to, let's talk about ICE. What are your guys' opinions on ICE?
I think illegal immigrants that have committed a crime should be deported.
How serious is the crime? Right, so that's becomes the problem.
Right. I mean, like if we're talking like speeding, of course not. No, but I don't know. Anything more serious than that, probably, like burglary.
Drug charges?
Well, I mean, you can
It
debate.
depends on the drug charge.
Okay.
If it's marijuana, no, I don't think that's too bad. But like, any
if you're a
drug,
heroin addict, then you probably don't really have that much. You're not probably a contributor to the economy anyway. So that's I think ICE is completely immoral. ICE arrests. A lot of people point to, deportation was higher under Obama. I didn't like Obama anyway, but whatever.
I know that.
Obama's stance on immigration was essentially conservative. But anyway, furthermore, under Trump, illegal immigration arrests have increased 44%, which is terrible. Here's an example. A Mexican national who became a legal resident in 1988 was detained on his front lawn because of a misdemeanor domestic violence charge from 2001. So you have all of these people who are committing tiny crimes 20 years ago who are getting deported for absolutely no reason. ICE is a completely immoral institution. I'm in favor of defunding ICE.
Well, about how many of those arrests are those anecdotal stories? Because anecdotes can be moving emotionally, but you have to consider the statistics.
Understandable, but at the same time, do you really believe that the vast increase in those arrests, 44% increase in those arrests, are because
I don't know, and I don't know if you do either, and so it's hard to say.
I can continue researching. I think it's very improbable that that illegal immigrants are vastly 44% increasing in their
Well, immigration is one of the biggest parts of Trump's
right
campaign.
And so he has to get his quotas up to get reelected.
Funding to make those arrests and what have you. So I don't there's definitely multiple reasons, and I bet you those stories like that, 2001 misdemeanor and people getting deported because of those have increased.
Right.
But if that's, only 2 or 5% of those deportations, it really.
Well, but then get this. So using that anecdote, domestic violence complaints in immigrant communities have decreased as a result. So the reporting on crime has directly decreased because, if you're a wife and you get your domestic violence is committed against you, you don't want to break up your family essentially because you think that your husband is going to get deported now. And do you see how she should absolutely be able
There's
to.
There's trade-offs with any regulation ever. There's always going to be trade-offs.
And that's where we share a common goal, Nico. But yeah. Nico, you should probably be in favor of defunding ICE anyway, from just a libertarian.
I'm in favor of defunding almost any government program. So.
Right, there you go. ICE is terribly inconsistent and immoral. But
I just feel like you're saying that with too much certainty when you don't know how many of their arrests are immoral. There's certainly many cases of that, but the weighting of that in those 44% increase, I would be curious to know, because I think that would explain a lot of how immoral they are.
Immoral? Oh, you mean? Okay, I see what you mean. I could go further on in the research with that, but
Yeah, I would actually really like to hear about that.
Yeah, I think people should only be deported if they're illegal immigrants and they've committed a serious crime. And Hayden, you brought up that people are less likely to call the police on minor
Right.
crimes if they are illegal because they have a fear of being deported. So that is also a major issue. So, but that also could be seen as a good thing because then they're encouraged and incentivized to become a legal immigrant and pay taxes. I mean, there is a safety concern.
But the legal immigrants are getting deported when they have crimes in history.
if you're a legal immigrant or an illegal immigrant, I mean, you would love to become a citizen of the United States, right? Like, there's all the incentive in the world to become a citizen of the United States. The issue is that the path to citizenship is very, very, very difficult, and the time barrier within it is almost astronomical to the point where you almost have to become an illegal immigrant before you become, start the process towards citizenship. I mean, at least on a visa anyway, because
I think ideally all the immigrants would have visas or citizenship, because then they're contributing just as much as any other American in their like income bracket.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Nathan, do you have any response to the ICE part of our debate here?
Well, because like Nico said earlier, for example, the fact that you're using anecdotal evidence about how immoral ICE is, and the fact is, although it's Nico's stance that we should defund all government programs, ICE serves a purpose to deport illegal immigrants. Because that's not based, because I think the government is necessary in the fact that when people are committing crimes, specifically illegal immigration that hurts, the American worker, specifically, maybe not the economy, but the worker in general, I think that's a problem. Now, I understand that illegal immigrants occupy a lot of the agricultural or other fields that they,
unskilled labor jobs.
Correct. But when you hurting the American worker and their wages, for example, when Fidel Castro opened up his port so people can actually leave Cuba, I believe it was like 1959 or something like that. When they went in there, it was found that American citizens, unskilled ones, the labor that these Cuban migrants were taking over, their wages dropped between 10 to 20%. So I find that a problem when the American worker is a big part of what we
Well, but you also want to look at like the net job, like is the economy in that area now becoming more productive? Because now you're bringing in more tax revenues to the government.
Well, not necessarily if they're illegal.
Well, no, but if it's an illegal worker who then works for a business and not on their own, and that business begins to make more money because they're paying less, then their profits are being taxed more by the government. And then
But that goes.
I mean, obviously, it'd be ideal if they're also paying taxes.
But that goes against your philosophy of not taxing businesses as much to incentivize competition.
When you lower, I know, but I'm just saying, like,
in general, you're saying it benefits the economy because these businesses are, making more money and they're getting taxed on it. So then it goes to the U.S. government. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think when you want as high,
and you're overlooking the American worker in exchange for some economic benefit. I understand the economy.
I'm just saying there actually might be a net benefit there. I'm not certain of that.
A net benefit maybe to the government and the economy overall, but not to the American worker.
Yeah, but that's only a small.
So you're just
portion of the population. I'm not saying it.
But you're ignoring a small portion of the population in exchange for economic benefit. We're already the top country in GDP. So, I understand, if we drop a few places in exchange for benefiting the American workers' wages.
I'm not saying we want to hope to increase our GDP, but increasing our GDP per capita can be good as long as there isn't absolutely.
But that's an exchange for the American worker losing their job or losing wages or, losing a big
factor. Lose their jobs, then that begins to become a problem.
But that's what's happening. They're losing their jobs and their wages. I'm sorry that I want American workers to be paid more.
I'm not saying I don't want them to be paid more. I'm saying,
but the process you're supporting, the process you're supporting is decreasing their wages inherently.
The idea of an American worker, though, is kind of a curious thing, right? Because, like, if you give two people the same job and, the first person's wage only decreased by 20%, then that is a moral standpoint to me. You're employing two people who are humans, regardless of whether or not they're American citizens or not. And American citizens are, what's the idea of an American citizen is not necessarily tied down to any ethnicity or culture or
American
race.
citizen is someone with legal citizenship.
I understand, but what you're doing is decreasing the wage 10 to 20% is quite frankly a lot, depending on how much the worker made. So
from a moral standpoint, it's okay to me if you're employing two people.
Yeah, then you get a net benefit.
But it's not necessary. Right. It's not necessarily because you're employing two people. You're employing people that are either illegal or taking less because there's a surplus of workers. Because the reason these wages are decreasing is not because there's so much.
Well, it's not necessarily a surplus.
Can I finish? There's not the reason these wages are decreasing is not necessarily because there's an amount of jobs out there that are not being utilized by American workers. Is specifically my example of in Florida. But what's causing the decrease in the wages is because there's so many more people to employ that you don't have to offer so much more money for this job.
Yeah.
You can offer exactly because it's supply and demand. But
I just don't think it's an immoral standpoint to pay an illegal immigrant for doing labor. I don't think
that's the government.
Right. This just comes back to the central question: are you going to value the American citizen over what's best for humanity as a whole on a global scale?
Yes, I'm going to benefit. I'm going to benefit the American worker. Well, the responsibility of the American government is to benefit the American, not an illegal immigrant. And it's not to benefit humanity. Its responsibility is to benefit America. It's supposed to benefit American workers.
I think that's the main priority, but I don't think that's our only priority. I mean,
especially if you're
taking that America First stance, then shouldn't we pull out of every single war we're in and just
no, because
divorce the United Nations does not become significant in world politics?
I dislike the United Nations, but I understand the problem of when you do that, you allow China to become a number one thing, and that's protecting American interest but you're protecting American interest by staying in the UN and staying in the Security Council. That's completely different than allowing illegal immigrants to come here or illegal immigrants that decrease the wages of American workers.
Yeah, but you can also consider the fact that if they come here and they're getting paid less and the business wants to sell more of their product, whether that be a service or a good, now, because the majority of people living in that area are going to be American citizens are paying less for, say, for example, they're coming in working for a gardening company. Now they're paying less for gardening, which is better than the American citizens hiring them. Or say they work.
But who pays for gardening? Who pays for gardening? The rich and wealthy, not necessarily the American worker. Who pays for gardening is mainly the rich and wealthy. I'm
just using that as one example. You could say if they come and they lower the wages at grocery stores, then now the grocery store might find it.
But you're still harming somebody. You're harming the American citizen who doesn't get that job.
But I think we're at an impasse here because I think the three of us, besides Nathan, have a different view on just like I think we have a fundamental view.
Yeah, you guys are globalists.
I wouldn't consider myself a
right. I mean, we don't really hold this America First stance in terms of
what I was going to say is
by not being America First, though, you're putting Americans last. That's
Nathan.
My point.
What I'm saying is that Nathan, you're focusing on one statistic to say that this is hurting American wages. Unskilled American wages by 20%, but it could be benefiting other Americans. And so that 20% might not be as drastic when you take into account the full economic impact of those illegal immigrants.
Yeah, and I mean, this is another debate that we could have of, the America First mindset and what our role should be on a global scale. I mean, you have Trump over here. This is not necessarily related to our debate right now on immigration. pulling funds from the World Health Organization, pulling
Base.
from the Paris Climate Accord. So
Based.
I mean, that's another
Because we were
What?
paying too much.
That's another debate. That's another debate of, do we want to have a role in international politics, or do we want to be
I think it depends.
isolationist? Because
I think it
Trump is
depends on
being
what
we want
very,
to find a happy
he's very
middle.
isolationist. He's
I
taking
feel like in politics, people tend to deal in absolutes, but in a democratic system, it's extraordinarily rare to find absolutes.
Yeah.
And so
And
I think there is a middle
I just-
ground, and you have to find one.
if you're an immigrant and you come in and you perform a construction job and you labor for that construction job, you should be paid for that construction job, regardless of whether or not the status on which you entered the country was illegal or legal. The job
But
which
my
you have
point-
performed
Yeah, but
is legal.
also,
And
yeah, because
benefiting the
you're
economy.
paying. I understand that point, Hayden. That you should pay the person for their labor, but I'm saying we stop that before they even start working.
but you also have to consider
Why?
because wages are going down,
Benefit.
construction gets cheaper, and then homes will go down because as people want to sell their homes, they're going to lower prices, and they can while maintaining profit margins. So now homes in America, which are most likely to be bought or rented by Americans, are cheaper, and that's a benefit for the American people. It's not the only cause or the only effect of immigration, but you have
The
to.
point is, you're hurting the people that need it most. The low skilled and the American
Well, yeah, but
worker.
if their wages
ones
go
that
down
need
by
it the-
20%,
If you pay a little bit more, if you
also
pay a
goes
little
down
bit
in
more for
price.
houses, if you pay a little bit more for houses, the people that are low skilled and American workers not necessarily pay for houses because they're not necessarily
But
buying
if the
houses
house
because
is
they're not
cheaper,
making.
they might be able to rent it.
But when their
With the
wages
la-
go down, they can't rent it because their wages went down 20 or
Yeah, but the
10 to
price of
20%.
the home also went down.
But the price of the home doesn't necessarily go down 10 to 20%. You realize it, right?
Yeah, no, but
there's more of a
it's
negative.
not
But there's
just
more
the
of a
home;
negative.
it's also the groceries and
Other
the
stuff.
things they
I
buy for their
understand, but
home.
I understand. But at one
Well,
point, when
income
wages
doesn't
go down,
determine wealth. It's
but it's what you get. And when people are living wage to wage or paycheck to paycheck, then they need that money that they get. And if
Yeah.
they go down or they don't have the job in the first place, then
what
they
I'm
can't.
saying is
They can't
I
even
feel like
afford
you're-
any of those things that you're saying are going down. It benefits the upper class for sure.
what I'm saying is that there's a certain level where immigration is healthy and good for the economy, and it's the
Well,
government.
I would agree. But at one point, you got to say enough. We've had a surplus of immigration. For
No, you don't.
Yeah,
Yes, you
why?
do.
You do have to
Why
say
you
it,
don't?
no,
As birth
Nathan,
rates
you're saying
decline,
cut it
we
off
need
entirely.
immigration to continue.
But I would like to incentivize birth rates. I think there's a way to
and
do that.
immigration is.
That's-
Immigration rates are
That
also
hasn't been
increasing.
shown to be a feasible policy, Nathan.
Because it's just starting. Japan's like one of the first countries that are going into that phase.
right. And I
That's
don't
why
think,
it's not feasible.
Yeah, I'm not saying
I
we
don't
should.
think conservatives also would be in favor of policies that would encourage birth rates. I mean, that's
That's not.
not a
That,
very
but you're
conservative.
you're talking about conservative Inc. who shows for big business. You're not talking about true conservatives that are actually trying to conserve the American
Those are
culture and the American
populists.
No, those are the true conservatives. The whole point of conservative is to conserve what we have. What the conservative Inc. and what the Republican Party is doing is not conserving what we have. What they're doing is shilling for big business so that things can go down for the top 1% and make a lot more money and get have things cheaper for the upper class. It's not helping the American worker.
It is also helping. I'm saying at a certain point, immigration is negative.
And I think it is already at that point.
all right.
you-
Well, I guess we just have a difference in opinion here. I think
I
we
reached.
should- yes.
I found the evidence that Nico was looking for. I've been looking
About
through it.
ICE?
So okay, it's gonna go down a little bit of a rabbit hole here, but it's okay. In 2018, 66% of the individuals arrested by ICE were convicted criminals, more than half of which were drunk driving convictions. And then I looked up, do immigrants commit drunk driving? I looked up and found basically an article
Immigrants are
stating
legal
that
immigrants.
immigrants don't commit drunk driving offenses at a larger rate than natural-born citizens.
Well, I think that if you are charged of drunk driving, then you should be deported.
That is reckless endangerment of
That
society.
that is
But my point, I
That's
don't
basically-
think so because
The reason drunk driving
treated as a murder charge.
You don't think
you're more
when
likely
you-
to kill
when you-
people.
Yeah, when you're driving under the influence, you're basically I mean,
I don't think it's enough to be deported because because
100%.
what I'm
You're
saying,
putting other people's lives in risk. I mean,
Well,
but a natural born American
these-
citizen does the same thing at the same rate.
Hayden, are these?
but you can't deport American citizens because they're already, they're born here or naturalized. That's the whole point. Is when
Yeah.
someone's an illegal immigrant.
But
when someone's an illegal
then
immigrant,
that
you're
doesn't.
giving
That's a
them-
logical fallacy.
But how so? When you're getting
If you should be deported because you commit a drunk
There's
driving
a
felony,
reason we call it the
then
American
you should be
government.
deported regardless of whether or not you're a citizen or not. If it's that bad of an
you don't
offense, then you should be
understand. You
deported
don't
regardless.
understand that. No, you don't understand that when
what
it's
country
illegal
would want to
immigration.
take a drunk driver? I mean, a drunk driver. That's
Can I
Damage to
talk?
public.
When you're talking about illegal immigration, you're basically giving them a chance to be here, even though they shouldn't be here in the first place. There's a chance for them, and they just failed that chance by drunk driving.
yeah, exactly. You can't come. Yeah, that's unacceptable. We cannot set the precedent as a country that is acceptable to. I mean, if you
kills
go
people.
out
once
driving
again-
under the influence,
again,
you're
putting
basically
American
saying
I don't think it's.
Wow.
I mean,
you're
you need to be
basically
punished
saying
for it,
I know
obviously.
I
I'm
could
not-
be I know I could be taking other people's lives, one or
Or
over.
you could be damaging buildings.
Exactly. That's how could you? I have no sympathy for anybody that makes
Drunk
the
driving
decision
only
to get
costs
in a
the
car drunk. No sympathy. They should have.
like a marijuana.
I don't have a sympathy for it. I don't think I don't think you should be deported for it.
I do. Well, I think
think
they
that-
need to be placed on. They need to perform better if they want to have the right to become American citizens, because they don't have the birthright of an American
Exactly.
citizen.
If you come here as an immigrant, especially if you know you are not documented, you should be acting in a better way.
Generally,
You should be acting better knowing that you're not legal.
Now I understand. In Hayden's defense, I'm just gonna say it just because I'm an honest person.
Yes.
Even though Hayden accused me of being a liar earlier, even though I'm not.
Well,
In
you were.
Hayden's defense, I wasn't lying. You just made something
Continue.
false. I wasn't. So my point is, the difference between drunk driving is a wide margin, because someone that's super old compared to someone that has like a minimal intoxication rate that's technically illegal. The person that has the intoxication rate at a certain point may drive better than someone that's has glasses and is older. And the other point is that they're drunk driving in the first place. In Hayden's defense, not all drunk driving would necessarily occur in a death or a
But
property
it's more
damage.
likely to than regular.
But no, that's what I was saying. I was just saying in Hayden's defense, it's not guaranteed that all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Intoxication levels that.
And the current punishment for a natural born citizen for drunk driving doesn't really withhold the same value for that of someone who's an immigrant.
But illegal
But,
immigrants should be punished on a higher level.
And also,
Probably, but at the same time, like that much of a disparity? Deportation versus a fine? No.
I mean, you can. I mean,
But
that's
also-
certainly debatable, but I think
but also you can get into the debate of whether or not we should increase the
I don't think
um,
it's inhumane.
punishment, whether or not we should increase the punishment for drunk driving. That's another debate.
Like Hayden, you're calling ICE inhumane because they're deporting people based on drunk driving felonies. I think that's a bit of a stretch.
I don't think that's inhumane. I think that's completely.
You can say it's a bit harsh, but inhumane is just that's unfair.
ICE is the organization that is holding kids in cages at the border. Like it's an inhumane.
But that's also for a reason. You can get into that debate.
That's
to
another-
prevent human trafficking.
There's no reason that no. But there's no reason that is justifiable by. There's none.
It's to prevent human
Yeah,
trafficking.
but you can
That's why you separate the
justify
parents.
deporting people for DUIs is what I'm saying. I'm not.
Wait.
I'm not
If a parent gets arrested when he's in the car with a child, the parent and the child are going to be separated. I mean, the separation.
Put in a cage and put in a room full of like hundreds of tiny children with no education, no supervision, who have nowhere
So
to
my
shit.
point is, what would you
I'm
do?
not defending that. I think that is humane.
It's inhumane.
But you were talking about how ICE unfairly deports people for smaller felonies, and I'm saying it's not fair to call ICE inhumane for deporting people on the basis of a DUI. That's
Okay.
what I was specifically talking
We
about.
can debate that. I feel like we did debate that, but then
Yeah, no.
again, the numbers are not consistent with that. 66% of the individuals arrested by ICE were convicted criminals. That's only 66%.
What was the other 30 whatever?
So that would mean 30% are DUIs.
Oh, 30% were DUIs.
30% were DUIs. Only 66% were convicted criminals.
But what was the other 30 whatever percent? Were they illegal immigrants?
They were illegal.
I don't know.
Because then the government has every right to deport them. There's a reason those laws exist. You can't just ask them to ignore those laws.
Right. I mean, you can't just not
You can debate.
find an illegal immigrant and then keep them in the country. But
Yeah.
I think we should ramp down their funding and try to create a way to citizenship. I think that would be the number one option there. But anyways, we can we can revisit this topic if it's popular, but I think we could wrap it up now. If anybody has any last
I'll just say the
statements
closing thing.
before we close it up. Yeah, go ahead, Nathan.
So I was just going to say, tune in for the next episode, and we'll be debating something else.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments, and also let us know which topics you would like us to debate. We'll take your suggestions. So
You 4 viewers are very appreciated.
Excellent.
All right, so do we say base now?
all right, yeah, let's do it.
All right.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Base.
Base.